I made these live edge plant propagation displays just in time for spring, even if it's still freezing here in Nebraska. Started out drawing a 2-scale design on my notepad. The idea is to put these glass vials into the wood so you can place plants growing out of the vials. I used whatever scraps of live edge wood I had laying around. These were going to be for a cutting board, but never got used. I had some black walnut and a small slab of aspen wood. So I think this will be a good way to put it to use. Did a quick cleanup of the live edge, just to remove any loose debris and bark that might flake off later. My sketch was drawn to scale. The length is 6 inches long, and so it made it really easy to mark where on this slab of live edge I needed to make my first cuts. I enjoy projects you kind of make up as you go along, and this is definitely one of these. Don't feel like you have to hit the exact dimensions. On this piece, I was making 2 6 inches, and I had a leftover one, so we had to consult the project manager. Do we just do 2 6 inches, or do we have that second piece be longer? Nope, 2 6 inches it is. Went over to the chop saw and cut these all out, and I did all my pieces in the background off camera. The idea here is to drill holes top down into the live edge and place these vials in them. The depth will be up to you. However, one thing you do need to check is make sure that the thickness of the wood is bigger than your vial. I'm using 1-inch diameter vials for reference. I chose a 1-inch vial because I have a 1-inch Forstner bit, and I didn't want the vials to be rattling around in a hole that might be too big. Because my drawing is to scale, it shows exactly where I need to place my 1-inch holes, and that's all I'm doing here. As you can see, the SketchUp is really a mock-up. I don't have a piece of wood that sharply angled or anything, but I'm just using this for the guidelines of where I'm going to drill those holes. Flipped the wood over and did the same thing on the bottom, and I was going to use a square just to draw lines up the entire face of the board, just so I can really visualize where those vials are going to go and how deep I want my drill press to go into that wood. And I'm just being overly cautious. I want to get it right the first time. And once I got a hang of it, then I just kind of whip through them. Next, I figured out how deep I want these holes cut. And the great thing about this is you can kind of eyeball it. And I chose a depth that I thought was appropriate, that the vials wouldn't become loose when they had weight in them. Having never drilled top down into a live edge standing piece of slab before, I thought I could just hold it, and that didn't work at all, obviously. I blame Winter for my lack of judgment. So the piece was wobbling around too much, and so my plan was to trace one of these 6-inch pieces on a scrap piece of wood. I was going to drill 2 holes into it, and then from the other side, I could screw in 2 screws through these holes. I'm going to screw the screws through that piece of wood until they just come out the other side, and then I'm going to place my live edge slab onto those and make an indentation. That indentation is where I need to drill pilot holes. So the plan is I'm going to screw this piece of wood into my base plate. And because it's hardwood, I need pilot holes. Is this the best way to do this? I have no idea. I'm sure there's a tool that maybe does something what I'm looking for, but I'm short on tools and, want to make this happen. So once I got that live edge slab attached, it felt pretty solid. Now I just had to readjust my height on the drill press to account for the board that was now under it. It was me just being overly cautious to line everything up, get it straight, make sure it was centered enough. And I guess if you're going to be pumping out a lot of these, it does help to have a certain size, like these 6-inch pieces. That way the holes always lined up. It was easy to really kind of mass produce them when I got the hang of it. So I clamped the base plate down and moment of truth and really went slow. Obviously, I was just being overly cautious, wanted to make sure everything lined up, and I wasn't, too far away from that piece of live edge that I was going through the side of it rather than in the middle of it. And you know what? Worked out pretty well. Not disappointed at all. Did a quick little test fit there, kind of blew out the sawdust, and yeah, doesn't wiggle. If you put weight or flowers in it, it won't fall out of it. So, really good design. Once I figured that process out, it was time for a refresher. I had to use my bourbon barrel stave bottle opener to get some good German lager. So what next? I just gotta unscrew that from the base plate, kind of inspect it, and I was happy with it. I just repeated this over and over and over until I got all my pieces cut and drilled in. Now it's time for everybody's favorite part, sanding. And yep, did all the corners, knocked off those sharp edges. This piece of aspen was too big for my chop saw, and like I said, I'd ideally use the table saw, but sometimes you just gotta do things by hand and busted out the old trusty handsaw. My pieces were all cut and drilled into. This is what I ended up with. I did have a larger set that I didn't want to knock down into a 6-incher. It's kind of a weird size, so got a 3-piecer. And I'm just going to use wipe on poly and go over all of these. You could do kind of whatever you want. I want to do poly. It's what I had on hand. And remember, they might be filling this up with water if they're going to do propagation, so I kind of to make it a little waterproof. My next goal is to drill keyhole slots in the back of these, and I don't have a router table, and I only have a full-size kind of big router, so this is a good excuse to go buy a palm router with a keyhole bit. So perfect. Any excuse to buy a tool works for me. I created this little jig for my keyhole bit, just got scrap wood, and the idea is I'll place my workpiece under it, and then this jig will prevent the router from kind of wiggling about, so I get a hopefully straight keyhole cut. I had to be sure I didn't place my keyhole slots on where a vial would go, so I was placing them about ½ inch in from each side. You could place it in the middle, but if you're going to hang it on the wall, it might, sag to the left or the right. So two slots is better than one. I'm replacing a second piece the same height as my work piece because, well, I didn't make the best jig in the world, so it was sagging left or right. And then the line in the middle of my jig is kind of where that keyhole will start. And so once I get it lined up, just plunge that in and make your bit. And as you can see, it's not wiggling back or forth, and it's going to be a pretty nice straight cut, which is good. If you have a router table, I think that's the way to go. Just set up some stop blocks and be a lot easier. And I managed to get all my pieces done using this method, though. Some were cleaner than others, but hey, first attempt at keyholes. I'm really happy the way these turned out. I went out and bought some flowers just for some photo opportunities for my website, and really not mad about it at all. You could definitely use these for real plants and put water in the vials. That's why they're polyed and different designs, or you could just do what I did and have them as display pieces. I'll leave more details about these pieces in the description below. I think they turned out well, and I feel like you can kind of do your own thing, make it up as you go along, and it's a fun project.